And I request you, Mr. Chair, to ask the senator to apologize so that we can move on and leave this behind us.
No, I don't intend to do that, Mr. Hickey. I wasn't here last time, as you observed yourself. I have only your statement for what happened, and so I'm not in a position to do that.
Mr. Chair, that is completely untrue. You have said yourself that you have received reports about the last Senate. You have characterized those reports as being somehow improper action on my part, which I find questionable, Mr. Chairman.
I have only your statement as to what happened between you and Mr. Vachon. That's the only source of information I have about that. Did you want to say something, Gary?
Well, I think we will need to look at the minutes because what Senator Hickey just said does not correspond to what I remember from the last meeting in the Senate. I think the protest was not over the fact that the camera was not on. The protest was over the answer provided by Vice President Old on where you were during the last meeting. So the protest started at that point, and it's only later that it was transformed into a protest about the camera. I think the minutes are unclear regarding that, and I'm going to make a recommendation. I don't know if the other senators remember the events the way I remember, but it does not correspond to what Mr. Hickey has just said.
Okay. Oui, Madame.
I would like to say that I think that what the other Senate member just said is grossly inaccurate. I believe that the protest was over the fact that we didn't have the camera. He said it very clearly, time and time again, and he asked Monsieur Francois Would to turn the camera back on. That's what the protest was over. And so in my respectful opinion, that is what was being discussed. And so I do ask that the members of the Senate also ask for an apology to Mr. Hickey, because I think it's important that we discuss the issues and not to make character assassination. Like the fact that we're coming to that point, I think reaches an all-time low for the members of the Senate. I think it's completely reprehensible, and folks should be ashamed of themselves.
Mr. Hickey?
Mr. Chair, I maintain my point of privilege, and I ask you to ask for an apology from the member of the Senate.
No, you've already asked. I've already told you I was not going to do that, Mr. Hickey. According to the procedure that we adopted some months ago, a point of privilege, this is a point of privilege, is it? I think you said at the beginning it's a point of, is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
It says here, a point of privilege may be raised by a member when he or she believes that his or her rights have been infringed upon and the conduct of the meeting has been compromised by this. This motion does not require a seconder and is undebatable. The chair rules on points of privilege. So I guess what it requires for us to get on with the meeting is a ruling on my part. It put me in a difficult position because I was not here the last meeting, and I have only what you say as a
Mr. Chairman,
indication of
perhaps you should turn over your power to the chairman from the last meeting if you don't feel that you have the competency or the ability to make that decision. This was, Mr. Chairman, a very harsh comment directed toward me. I feel very strongly about this, and I don't think you should just brush this aside.
Oh, I'm not brushing it aside, Mr. Hickey. You've asked Mr. Vachon if he's prepared to apologize. He said he is, if you will apologize. And you said you're not, and so he's not prepared to offer his apology. My interest is getting on with the meeting, on which we have a number of important things on the agenda. I really do think we should return to this at the end of the meeting. In the meantime, we can reflect on how to deal with it. But for the moment...
Mr. Chairman, I asked for this apology the week following the last meeting. There has been plenty of time to reflect on it. Mr. Chairman, you're brushing this aside. This was an unacceptable attack on a student senator. This goes a long way to damaging the atmosphere at the Senate. It goes a long way toward hampering student participation in the Senate's deliberations. You stated that you were not present at the last meeting, and so therefore you don't have the authority to rule.
That's not what I said.
So perhaps you should allow Mr. Houle to take your chair for this item, if
No,
that's the case?
As chair, I have the authority to rule. I just said that because I wasn't here and didn't hear the intervention between yourself and Mr. Vachon, I don't have any knowledge of what happened apart from what you've told me. I'm going to suggest we put this off to the end of the meeting, that we'll reflect in the meantime, and let's get on with the agenda of the meeting.
So, Chair, I think it's shameful that you're trying to put aside a matter of treatment of student senators at the very end of a meeting.
You may think so, Mr. Hickey, but that's what's going to happen. Yes, Madame.
I'd like to call the issue the fact that I sent an email to all members of the Senate to discuss decorum and respect, and yet my issue was not added to the agenda. I do feel as though I am being not acknowledged. My concerns are not being acknowledged.
Is it not item 13B?
It is not in the agenda.
That is my question, actually. Thank you for raising it.
And I've brought that point up over the past 3 meetings, and yet it has failed to. And so I'm just wondering, is there a 2-tier system for Senate members? Like, because I've asked this to be addressed several times, and yet I'm just completely being ignored. I feel disrespected by the Senate, and I feel as though before we can move forward, this should be acknowledged right now.
Diane, do you have a comment on that?
Well, it didn't come to me as in the form of a motion. I'm sorry if I misunderstood your intent here, but as far as I can, certainly this can be addressed under 13B. I thought it could be incorporated into that discussion.
But I feel as a member of the Senate, I shouldn't just be incorporated into discussion. I feel as though it should have its own heading. If perhaps it wasn't clear, then maybe you should have asked for clarification. I could have said that because I specifically said in the email that I wanted it discussed at the last meeting, and I sent it to all members of the Senate. And to see that it just wasn't put in the agenda is completely disrespectful.
Well, what you're suggesting, now that we're discussing approval of the agenda, you're suggesting that the agenda be amended to reflect your item.
Yes.
And you tell me what your item is again?
It's to discuss decorum and respect.
Okay, well, why don't we add that to...
Before we move into
the agenda?
approval of the agenda, I'd like a clear ruling on my point of privilege, please.
I'm going to defer my ruling on the point of privilege until the end of the meeting. We're going to come back to this under item 13.
Mr. Rock, a point of privilege is about rights of senators. It's not an item that can be, with due respect, that can be put aside.
I understand your position.
Right, I believe that's a procedural right to have a point of privilege ruled on at the time that it's made.
And I have a procedural right as the chair to tell you we're going to defer it until item 13B on the agenda.
Are you saying you have a procedural right to defy the Senate's procedure? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Chair?
I've made myself clear.
No,
Madame,
you certainly have not made yourself clear, Mr. Chair.
we're deferring a ruling on your point of privilege till the end of the meeting.
Mr. Chair, I think
we're going to amend the agenda
Mr. Chair,
to put your
Mr.
item
Chair,
on.
This would be a point of
before
order,
item
Mr. Chairman.
13.
I'm now making a point of order. Are you, Mr. Chair, to be clear, are you stating that you have the procedural right to defer a point of privilege to a later point in the meeting?
Yep.
That's your ruling?
Yep. Now, as far as the agenda is concerned, with the permission of the Senate, I'm going to amend the agenda to add the item decorum in the Senate as an item just before number 13.
I'd like to see it further up in the agenda.
So would I, but we got a busy agenda.
I know, but I
Just for discussion. Yeah.
It should be level
Huh?
10B for discussion.
Maybe for discussion.
For discussion 10B.
Yeah. Well, what about after the ombudsperson, make it item 10B? Gary?
Yeah, so 13B, en français, traitement des étudiants sénateurs, treatment of student senators. I don't understand why it's only student senators. Many members of the Senate last time, I thought they were mistreated. Many of them were not able to speak, actually. So I think it should be broadened. Either we delete the word étudiant or student, or we add another point on how to treat other members of the Senate as well. It could be treated under decorum, but I thought it was a little strange that it was only student senators. Many of us felt that we were not treated properly last time either.
Okay. So we could call it treatment of senators. At item 13B. You want to make it more general to treat?
Well, it's unclear to me if it's treatment of senators inside the Senate, outside the Senate, or it's a very general point. So maybe we could ask for further clarification.
At whose instance was this put on the agenda?
There was not very much, there was no explanation.
Well, Gary, I think there's scope for you to raise your point as we discuss this. So we come to item 13. Oui, monsieur? Est-ce que vous avez quelque chose à dire? Non? OK. Alors, on est arrivé maintenant à l'item 4, c'est-à-dire procès-verbal de la réunion du 3 octobre.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of order. This is regarding my point of privilege that you've decided to defer until the end of the meeting today. I'm looking here at the Code Morin, Chapter 12, and the third paragraph says that if a point of order or a point of privilege is raised, the person speaking on whatever item might be before the Assembly at that time must retake their seat until the question is decided. And that person can't continue their remarks essentially until that point is concluded. I don't understand your decision to defer a point of privilege. It seems very clear to me that points of privilege and points of order are to be ruled on immediately and dealt with. They have to do with the conduct of the meeting. They have to do with fairness and with proper treatment of senators. And I ask that you change your decision to defer and make your ruling.
No, I'm going to defer till the end of the meeting, Mr. Hickey. I think you're entitled to a ruling on your point of privilege at this meeting, and you will have one before the meeting ends.
Can you explain your authority to defer a point of privilege?
Well, the chair has the authority to, subject to being overruled by the Senate, of course, has the authority to govern the procedure of the meeting, determine how things are addressed. And in my judgment, it's better to leave this discussion till the end of the meeting. It'll give us a chance to reflect further on what the options are procedurally. And we have a lot of
Mr. Chairman, there's no better time than now to reflect on what the options are procedurally.
You may think so.
With respect.
You may think so. But as chair, I've decided we're going to defer till the end.
I think so, and I think Mr. Morin thought so as well.
Okay.
And it's written down in his book that in which spirit we're supposed to be guiding our meetings here.
Nothing you've said is inconsistent with my ruling that we deal with it at the end of the meeting.